Good morning, everyone. This is Mike C. coming at you as usual from beautiful sunny Halifax, Nova Scotia. And what we're looking at here is actually Dartmouth, Nova Scotia. This is the Tufts Cove smokestacks in Dartmouth. This is where Halifax and the regional municipality gets most of its electricity from. And I figure what better way to start a webcast about tobacco than a couple smokestacks? Seems to make sense, right? So, without further ado, sit back, light up a smoke, and let's head down to the archaeological birthplace of tobacco, the Marañón River in beautiful Peru, Andean Peru. Nicotina tabacum. That's what we're talking about here. This is modern tobacco and ancient tobacco. It's part of the notorious nightshade family. And this is a plant that's highly prolific. You get thousands and thousands of seeds out of every pod. It's a plant that's native to the American tropics. The first fossilized evidence is here from the Pleistocene period in the Marañón River in Peru. Now, tobacco, like maize, it's very interesting. It does not have any wild ancestors. Perhaps after a millennium of human harvesting, this is a plant that only exists as human cultivars. Evidence of the first use of this plant is by the Aguaguna aboriginals of the Peruvian Amazon. And they used the plant for a number of spiritual and medicinal purposes. I'll just tell you straight up, they use it as an enema, so do with that information what you will. Its use quickly spread from this region, though, throughout North and South America. It was soon taken up by the Mayan civilization. Mayan of Yucatan, Mexico, Guatemala, Belize, and some interesting, I think you're going to find this interesting and maybe rather intuitive, that wherever tobacco seems to go, it catches on very quickly in society. It's rare to see tobacco marginalized highly. Often it's regulated, but it's typically taken up by the residents of Region X upon arrival. What we're looking at here is a tobacco holder from the Mayan period from southern Campeche, Mexico. Now the inscription is written in Mayan and reads, "His or her tobacco holder," and inside there is evidence of tobacco residue. So it's pretty safe to say that this was someone's tobacco holder. I think that's a fair enough deduction. Now tobacco was pretty common throughout Mayan society here, and appears in quite a few artistic representations. We even get the word cigar from the Mayan language, from sicar, meaning rolled up tobacco leaves inside a leaf of maize or corn, or even other leaves found in the area. This is one of the numerous smoking techniques that we see throughout history, and seems to be one of the most common and popular. It also appears very frequently in this Mayan inscriptions. These are just a few of the paintings and depictions of tobacco consumption we see in Mayan artwork. And it's pretty clear that around the first millennium CE, the Mayans experienced what we would call an apocalyptic collapse of some kind. It's still up for debate in the literature what exactly happened to the Mayans. But what is clear is that a lot of them fled their homelands in a diasporic movement into North America, South America. And this spread tobacco pretty far and wide around the Americas, in the South, into the Caribbean. The Mississippi Valley, tobacco starts showing up after the first millennium CE. And it's here that our guy, Christopher Columbus, finds tobacco on one of his voyages in the Windward Bahamas. Columbus himself was one of the first Europeans to document tobacco at all. And he says and I quote, "The natives brought us fruit, wooden spears, and certain dried leaves which gave off a distinct fragrance. And this was considered to be tobacco." Even the word tobacco comes from the Taino word tabago, and this is where we get our name for our modern Caribbean island, Trinidad and Tobago. He described the natives as drinking the smoke. And it was, interestingly, a man named Rodrigo Hedges, which was one of the first Europeans, possibly the first European, to become a smoker. He took up the habit and brought it back with him to his hometown in Spain. He was promptly imprisoned in Spain because of the use of this stuff. And at first it surprised me. I'm thinking, okay, how are you going to imprison a guy for smoking a cigarette in public? But when you think about it, this would have been a very exotic thing for a European to see at the time. Apparently, Andalusia and Spain did not have the nargile hookah culture that is so common in the Middle East and throughout the rest of the Arab world. So tobacco was quite exotic, and consumption of tobacco, blowing out your nose, blowing big rings, this was not something that a European had typically been exposed to, and Rodrigo Hedges promptly got 7 years in jail for this fascinating activity. However, during this time that he was in prison, the habit really caught on. It really spread throughout Spain, Portugal, France. Tobacco in the form of snuff was even popular with Catherine de' Medici, the Queen Mother of France during the 1550s. She saw it as a way to cure her headaches, and she loved it. The growing of tobacco spread into the Mediterranean, and its distribution soon dominated by Spanish and European traders at the time. Some of the first smokers actually were sailors, especially those from Spain, Portugal, England. These were the people who were exposed to it, the first Europeans to really see tobacco smoke and its use in the New World. They eventually spread the use of tobacco on a popular level into port cities around the world during the 1500s. And we're going to see a lot more of this in installment number 3 of this tobacco series. I don't think I'm going to have time to get to that today. But it eventually enters the European pharmacology during the early modern age as a treatment for just about everything, from dysentery, worms, toothaches, hysteria, and a couple ones that you wouldn't really think, such as bad breath, cancer, dysentery. It was during the 1500s that the long pipe appeared. It was thought that this would cool the smoke going into the body, and you'd get all the health benefits without any of the lung, damage. Tobacco was introduced to Sir Walter Raleigh, founder of the Virginia colony, by Sir Francis Drake himself. Virginia colonists returning to England caused quite a stir in London and wherever with the habit of smoking. The new herb became known as saltweed. It soon became widespread all throughout English society. The century also saw the habit of smoking become really ingrained in European and Asian society throughout the 1600s. Its consumption levels really climbed quickly, especially in the form of snuff. By the early 1700s, Napoleon was said to have been a heavy user, as Queen Charlotte of England was also known as Snuffy Charlotte for her affection of the stuff. This is also the time when the first anti-tobacco blasts start coming out. King James VI himself admonished the use of tobacco, especially its smoking. He criticized the smell of tobacco, as well as its effects on the lungs, and its negative impact on the four humors. So this was cutting-edge medical research at the time, the paradigm of the age. The four humors would be imbalanced by the consumption of tobacco smoke. Public smoking was soon illegal in the Massachusetts colony, the more religious of the American colonies at the time. And this is what we're seeing here is a counterblast to tobacco. This was a work by King James himself, admonishing the use of this new fangled herb in society. He was not the only European monarch to take tobacco control, to make it a controlled substance. King Philip III of Spain made tobacco production illegal in Europe and required that it be shipped to Spain to roll cigars from the American colonies. This is where the first illegal cigarettes appear. You start to see them in Spain during the 1500s, 1600s. Tobacco was still pretty expensive stuff back then, and it wasn't too uncommon to see sailors and vagabonds scrambling the streets and harbors looking for extinguished smokes on the ground to roll into smaller cigarettes. which is where the first cigarettes are thought to have appeared. But we're going to see more on that in our next installment here. And it's around now where I think I'm gonna call it quits for the time being. We stand at about 1600. Tobacco is making real inroads in Europe. And in our next installment, I'd like to take a look at the impact of this widespread consumption and demand on the producers in the Americas. Part 3, I think we're going to look at East Asia, particularly China. I think you guys are going to find that quite interesting. So that's about it for now. This is Mike C.